Are you looking for an internet talk radio station for your podcast? Look no further. At the helm of Passionate World Talk Radio are two women that want to provide a spot for you and your podcast to be heard. There are many other places for your podcast, but PWTR has the audience. You will not be disappointed. Our station has been on the internet for the past 16 years. Call us for more information. 484-364-1032 or text Jeannie White, station manager at THECONNECTSHOW@gmail.com for podcast show details. Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain.
Hello, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, where our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guests may not represent those of the host or the station. Folks, yes, I do get excited every time I do a show, and I think all my guests are phenomenal. Well, today's guest is extra special to me. She is a girl, a gal, a young woman after my own heart. I like to think if I had a daughter, my daughter would be just like my guest, passionate, on fire, and I just love what Jennifer does. My guest is Jennifer, correct me if I say your name wrong, Jennifer Lagemann, who is founder of Next Gen Senior Copy and Marketing. She was a family caregiver, administrator, care manager. She's an advocate for caregivers, changing the way we look at aging. Folks, I'm going to tell you, I met Jennifer back in, I think, October, definitely November, and this young woman touched my heart. She was a caregiver for her grandmother. She cares about caregivers. She wants to change the way caregivers are looked at and about how aging is looked at. This young woman is going to be a force to be reckoned with, I guarantee you. So I want to welcome my friend, girl after my own heart, Jennifer Lagemann, to Chatting with Betsy. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, Betsy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited, too. I just adore you. I'm old enough to be your mom, but you're a girl after my own heart because you were so passionate and so caring, and I just love what you do. Can you tell the audience about your caregiving experience with your grandma, which changed really the course of your life? You were very young, but that really made an impression, an impact on you forever.
Absolutely. Yeah, my grandmother lived with my family since before I could even remember. She didn't move in because of aging reasons. She was just a part of our family structure. And when I was in middle school, I was about 12, she started to decline and had some early signs of dementia. So she needed like some companionship from me and my family. And then as time went on, her care needs increased. She had a stroke, she had cancer, she had a whole whammy of things coming her way. And I was planning on going to school for biology on a pre-med track, and I was planning on becoming a geneticist and being a genetic counselor, telling people what they were at risk for in terms of what they've inherited. And my grandmother died my first semester, and it really made me rethink what I wanted to do with my life and how I was going to move forward. And I started looking around for jobs, and I saw that caregiving was a job. I didn't know what a caregiver was. I didn't know that I was one. And so I started working as a caregiver at a local home care agency. And after 2 weeks, I was asked to work in the office. And as a college student, that was super helpful because the hours of a caregiver are super unreliable and unsteady, and I really needed a solid income. So working in the office gave me the ability to schedule caregivers for shifts and set them up for training, meet them with their first family for a shift, make sure they're comfortable, and filling in shifts myself. I worked 7 days a week, and it was really the time of my life, and I had so much fun doing it, and it really made me feel whole. Even when I was grieving, it really helped me to cope with what I was going through because I was able to help other seniors and other older adults really find peace and live in their homes comfortably.
That is incredible, especially for someone as young as you. And you were young when your grandmother died, and you come from the Vietnamese culture. So, families, they live together. And how was it? You interpreted for your grandmother. I know that. You were her interpreter. You had a lot of responsibility at a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. Culture had so much to do with my upbringing. I was raised Vietnamese. My mom taught me Vietnamese growing up, and my grandmother only spoke Vietnamese, so I had to be bilingual in order to care for her and talk to her and to talk to medical professionals. I also translated for my cousins because they didn't speak Vietnamese fully either. So a lot of my time was spent translating, interpreting, and even when medical interpreters were available at like a dentist, for example, they didn't speak our dialect of Vietnamese, which is from the southern side of Vietnam. And it was just a really interesting dynamic. Like when my grandmother died, for example, I was crying immediately. It was just my only way of expressing how I felt. And my mother was like, stop doing that. You're holding her back from her next life. And it was very much like this the entire time that we took care of my grandmother, and from then on that our culture really made us butt heads. Because she came from Vietnam and I was born in the States, so we had different outlooks on life. But I was hoping that maybe culture could bring us together, but it really did not. But my mom and I are closer today than ever because we have more distance. We are too close, too intimate. Like when we were both caring for my grandmother, we were working together too much, didn't talk about our emotions, and my mom still has a hard time talking about her emotions and how she feels. She kind of stuffs them down and bottles it all up, which is not good, but her way. I'm trying to be respectful of that, and it's something I'm trying to come to terms to, is that what I want for my parents might not be what they want for themselves, and that's something I'm really trying hard to work on, especially working in senior care. It's so tough for me.
That's so true, Jennifer. I've also had that experience with my mom. My mom is 92. My mom was 90 when my brother died. My mom comes from a generation, you didn't talk about your problems. She won't see a therapist because, in her words, I don't need to air my dirty laundry. And she keeps her grieving to herself. And it's hard when, you are open about your grieving. I'm open about my grieving. But I call it the older generation. I'm there myself now, considered senior citizen. But we grieve differently. And it's really bothered me that to know that my mom is suffering when she doesn't have to, when she can talk to someone, but she won't. But like you said, we have to respect that. And after my brother died, my mom was for the first time in her life, she lived alone. She went from, living at home, because that's what was done in the 40s, to getting married in their early 50s. And then when my dad went to a facility, my brother was still there. So when Bradley died, my mom was alone, and she wouldn't go to assisted living. We felt that it wasn't safe for her. And then this year, she went to assisted living. And, my brother died a year ago. Matt was 2 years ago. My brother died a year ago. So she wouldn't go last year. The last time she fell, my younger brother said, you really need to go to assisted living. And thankfully, she found a nice one where her friend is at. But she was very adamant about, I'm going to live in my home. Are you, well, your mom's probably not there yet because she's probably a lot younger than my mom, but how do you have any ideas, suggestions of how does someone get their parent to realize they're not safe at home anymore. They need to be placed.
Right. Sure. I think one thing that a lot of adult children do, and even grandchildren, probably make that promise to keep their loved one at home no matter the cost. And I think that's one mistake that a lot of us make with good intentions. Because it's not always possible. There may come a point where being at home is no longer safe or feasible given, an increased condition or decreasing condition, or your condition's getting worse, you take more medications, or you live on a multi-floor home. I think there are a bunch of reasons that home could be considered unsafe, and a lot of people don't make or don't get the resources they need to keep at home safely. Like a lot of people don't prepare. I saw a study from UMichigan, that most older adults want to stay at home but have made no preparations or made no plans to adapt their home or make it age-friendly. And that's where the disconnect comes from. You have that desire to stay at home, but what are you doing to make that feasible or a reality, like getting grab bars, getting those little lips in your floors filled or sanded down, like making those types of changes to make your home more friendly for getting older. We need to make those changes. Like, you don't have to talk about moving into a community necessarily, but if you want to prevent that from happening, you need to make changes today. Like with my parents' home, they have very creaky stairs, and I just think that one of these days it's going to fall through. And my parents aren't too much older than like 65, but it's important to make those changes as soon as possible.
Yes. My mom, she wanted to stay in her home, very determined to stay in her home, but she was falling. And the last time she fell, that was, that was it. It really was no longer safe. It's best that it comes from my brother and not from me, because she'll listen to her baby. Boys reign supreme, and
sure.
She'll listen to her son. Jennifer, I heard you say one time, and I want the audience to really hear this, because this just was it just really hit me. Like, you're just so awesome of an advocate. You look at caregiving as a diagnosis because of all things that I guess caregivers go through. Can you talk about that? Because I want the audience to hear that, because I think it's so important. That stuck in my mind when I heard you say that in the clubhouse.
Sure. Yeah, I did some research just asking family caregivers about their experience, and most of them have upwards of 5 or more symptoms as a direct result of their caregiving, whether that's insomnia, weight gain, weight loss, depression, anxiety, physical injury for one reason or another, whether that's injuring their back or falling themselves because of doing something, straining your weight. It could be a variety of things, but there are so many symptoms that caregivers experience. Some have marked off up to 15, and there's no way that anything else could have caused these things except for the caregiving itself. And I think we need to, really take a look at these things and be open about the fact that caregiving itself should be a diagnosis. I saw one time that someone said dementia, a diagnosis of dementia creates 2 or more patients, because you have a caregiver and you have the person living with dementia, and maybe there's a support system or people who are going to be caregivers. They are all patients of this condition as well.
Yes, that's true. And I think it depends what doctor you go to, where you are. I know my neurologist, his wife is a geriatric psychiatrist. They are now starting, finally, hallelujah, to notice the caregiver, care about the caregiver, and to provide resources of where can a caregiver go. And that needs to, I think, be all across the globe. When someone is diagnosed with some kind of dementia, yes, you're going to take care of the patient. What about the caregiver? They need a resource book. They need guidance. I say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village of people to help support a caregiver. How do you feel about that, Jenn?
I love that. I think that we really need to make resources more available for caregivers and make them feel okay to be a caregiver. A lot of people don't want to identify as a caregiver for one reason or another. And what if we lifted the stigma of being a caregiver? A lot of people don't want to reveal to their employer that they're a caregiver for reasons of termination or requiring accommodations that aren't favorable. We should be able to talk about these things at work, at home, with our family, with our friends. We should be able to talk about these things, be open, be transparent, and take these rocks out of our bag, as one of my friends says.
Yes, excuse me. Definitely. I was fortunate that when Matt was diagnosed, I told my boss, and she has a daughter who has many medical problems, so she was understanding. When she left and someone else took over, they were also understanding because I think their mother-in-law had dementia. And, I was very transparent. I worked in a preschool, and I said, I called Josh up at such and such a time. If he calls me, I must answer the phone. And I might have to leave in a moment's notice if an emergency comes up. And thankfully, also, Josh's employer was very, very good to him. He couldn't take the family leave because of how it's situated. He would have had to take days off. But they worked with Josh where he could work in the morning and be home in the afternoon when I went to work with, as Matt progressed near the end. And that was really nice to them. They love Josh, so they like working with him. Excuse me. Allergy season here in New Jersey. And I think you're right. We need to erase the stigma of caregiving and, be proud of being a caregiver. It's funny in a way because I say, when I think of caregiving, I'm like, I'm not caregiving anymore for Matt. But someone reminded me, Betsy, you are still a caregiver. I'm caregiving for my son, Josh, who has a cognitive disability. Do I think of myself as a caregiver for Josh? Not all the time. I forget. I forget sometimes. Yes, I am still a caregiver. And there are many different types of caregivers. Doesn't necessarily have to be someone with dementia. And I can say, because I am in a group and I am in many groups, I have a group, people who are caregivers put their health on hold. They don't have time to go to the doctor. They don't have the support. They don't have anyone to sit with them, their loved one, so they can go to a doctor. And folks, this is not right. I'm going to be very blunt here. Self-care, and I say this over and over again, is not an option. It's a matter of life and death, literally. It's a matter of your life as a caregiver. Do you want to have quality of life? Do you want to have quality of life after your loved one dies? And I am very straight up because that is going to happen. You have every right to enjoy life during caregiving and after caregiving. And I know this from experience. Many, many caregivers, as you know, Jenn, die before their loved ones because of the stress and not taking care of themselves.
Exactly. And self-care can come in many forms. It doesn't just mean massages and getting manicures, pedicures. It doesn't just mean cosmetic things. It can mean talking to a friend and just venting. You don't have to always offer a solution. to someone's problem. Sometimes just being a listening ear can be all of the self-care a caregiver needs to, refill their cup and recharge at the end of the day. They don't always need a solution because there might not be an alternative solution. I think we need to be frank with ourselves with what's actually realistic for a caregiver to do. It's not always feasible for someone to take a week-long vacation every month to de-stress. It's not always monetarily feasible. It's not always logistically feasible, and it's not always feasible in many other ways. I think we need to be more honest with ourselves with the kind of time that we have on our hands, what our loved one really needs, and how we can better care for them while managing our own expectations and what we're able to do ourselves, because we can't do everything. And I think that we expect ourselves to do everything because we love that person, or they're my mom, they're my dad, they're my parents. We expect ourselves to do everything when we are not capable of doing it all. And also to relieve the shame of outsourcing. There are companies out there like, I think it's called Silver Bills, and it handles your bills like in a concierge-style manner, and they can handle all of your finances or your loved one's finances. And that's one load lifted off your shoulders so you can handle everything else. Or sometimes it's just getting a navigator, someone who knows the healthcare system like the back of their hand. That's often the hardest part of caregiving, not the physical stuff, not the actual care, but just knowing how do I get, this nursing home stay covered, and knowing where to go. How do I apply for Medicare? How do I get Medicaid waiver benefits? How do I get VA aid and attendance benefits? These are things that people don't generally know about. And if you can reach out to resources, find places that are willing to help you, there are so many nonprofits and free organizations that are just waiting for you to reach out. Don't be afraid to outsource things that you think you should be doing. You can only do what you have with your 24 hours.
Absolutely, that's absolutely true. And I have to say this, I don't know about other senior centers. I only know about my own in my own town. I had no idea that the senior center offers free counseling. I didn't know that they offered help with Medicare until Matt needed it. My pharmacist told me, Betsy, why don't you go to the Evergreen Center? They help with Medicare. So I didn't know that. It was sometimes you don't even know about resources in our own town. And I went, and the social worker said, we also do counseling. And I said, well, I'm going to keep that in mind one day. And after Matt died, I called up, and I said, do you still do free counseling? And she said, yes. As I couldn't afford it with my insurance. And sometimes I know we are embarrassed to ask for help, or we feel like we failed our loved ones. You, as a caregiver, you did not fail. You are not failing if you need help. We do need help. Caregivers need help. I tell people, learn from my mistakes. I wish I had someone to help me navigate the hospice process. Don't wait till last minute. Plan ahead. Avoid a crisis. Get a nurse manager. Get a social worker. If you can afford it, I know not everyone can afford it. If you can find somebody affordable to help you with getting resources, I highly recommend it. Jennifer, I want to ask you, how would you like for people to see a different aspect of aging? How do you want to change that?
How do I want to change aging? I think we need to look within ourselves and tell ourselves that aging doesn't magically start at 55 or 65. We are aging from the day that we emerge from the womb. We are aging starting day one. I think that we need to really look within ourselves and say, why are we constantly berating older adults for just living their lives and for being human, for doing what they need to do to survive, and that they are independent, well-meaning, wise individuals. We become better versions of ourselves as we age. we're becoming more authentic to who we are. I'm not necessarily saying that we're better people inherently, but we're becoming more authentic to who we want to be and will become. And I think that we need to understand that there are a lot of taboos around aging, and I think that sex is one of them. Like, I don't think that people understand that intimacy doesn't fade with age. In fact, it gets better. And I think that we also need to destigmatize a lot of these things. Like, death should be talked about. We should talk about, intimacy. We should talk about, how things are going, and just to be honest with ourselves, really, because we're all going to be older. Whether we make it to that point or not, I can't say, but we need to really look within ourselves and appreciate the older adults in our lives. Like, I think that in living with my grandmother, I had a greater appreciation for older adults and what they had to offer. I have run into a lot of older adults recently. I have a 90-year-old couple lives across the street from me. They are so active. They travel all the time. They have a really busy schedule. Like, we have to schedule around their time because they're just so busy. And we met a couple when we went to Colorado last week. We played games with them. We went out to dinner. We got pizza. We learned so much from them. And this is all free knowledge, the stories that they tell. Like, I can't believe that we just get to experience that without any costs or strings attached, besides just making a new friend or two. And, to realize that we all have something to offer, no matter our age. We all have something to offer and to learn from each other. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. It's hard for me to wrap my brain that I'm going to be 65 in December and going to be on Medicare, getting all this Medicare stuff in the mail. And I'm like, oh, where did my life go? But I feel at the age of 64, I'm better than I've ever been. Definitely more authentic. I've actually found myself in my 60s. Never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now. And it's a whole new chapter. And it is a mindset of your aspect of aging. I used to love to hear my grandmother's stories of fleeing Europe. And she didn't talk too much about the ship coming over to America, but the love story between her and my grandfather. Different cultures, I have found, look at their elderly different, I think, than Americans. And the reason why I say this is because I live in a very large Asian Indian community. A lot of their parents live with them. They take care of them. They don't consider it a burden. They really are honored to do it. They're, expected to do it. And I worked with a coworker. She's Indian, and her mom's was in India. And she said, Miss Betsy, my mom's not here. May I please get a blessing from you? And I said, okay, but I don't know what you mean. And she bent down to my feet and kissed my feet and waved. She wanted my wisdom, she said. She said, you have wisdom. You've lived life. I was about the same age as her mom. And I was so honored that she thought of me that way. And this is how different cultures look at their aging population, that they can learn from them, that they're wise, that they can be get information and knowledge and wisdom from their elders. And I thought it was beautiful.
That is super beautiful. That's what I taught with my family, is that the expectation is that we take care of each other when we get old. Whether I move back in with my parents or not, I'm not sure. But that doesn't mean I won't be there to take care of them, because I definitely will. And I'm the only child between my mom and aunt, which will make things more difficult for me. So I have the foresight now, with my previous experience, to call on reinforcements, to see what our options are in the area, and relying on resources that are available to us, and taking in what I know from my work and what I've learned, to really reach out to people that are available to help me. And whether it's just a listening ear or a card or a meal train, you know, like anything can really be helpful. Like my grandmother had Meals on Wheels. Wasn't the best food, but it was something. You know, it was free. It didn't cost us anything. And it made sure my grandma had meals every day. And we had home health aides that came in and helped her bathe twice a week. And we had one that was really great. It helped her go outside and got her in her wheelchair and took her out and took her back. Every other aide treated her like she was bedbound, but this one talked to her like she was a friend, even though she didn't speak English, would take her out of bed, put her in her wheelchair. We built a ramp from the door to the road so that she could drive her around and pick a flower and come back inside and eat lunch. It was so amazing to watch. And I was like, I want to do what she does. But I didn't know what her title was at the time, so I didn't really know how to move forward from there. But I remember her asking my mom if she could have a day off to get her to do her citizenship test so she could become a citizen. And my mom being an immigrant as well, it was a really defining moment seeing my mom give her that affirmation, like, yeah, of course, take your day off. You know, you'll be one of us. You know, it was a really, really cool moment because my mom had a chance to become a citizen as well, and she got the chance to kind of give her the affirmation she needed to become a citizen as well. And it was just a really great moment because my mom worked so hard to become an American citizen, and I was fortunate enough to be born into this situation, which a lot of people don't have. And she didn't have the best command of English, but she wanted me to have that opportunity. And I pride myself on being a clear-speaking English speaker and knowing English well to really show her that I want to carry on her legacy, knowing that I can communicate clearly, that I can use my words to my benefit, to make connections, to build relationships, to make the world better with what I've learned.
That is very cool. And you have an advantage because you were bilingual. That is an advantage in a lot of areas. I wish I knew how to speak more than one language. I have to ask you, Jenn, can you tell us about your new career now that you are founder of Next Gen Senior Copy and Marketing? Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. Because I've seen how healthcare providers operate and how difficult their websites can be to navigate, I wanted to create a solution for providers, especially in the senior care space, to really give their users a great reading experience, to create articles that are helpful, knowledgeable, and that speak to them on their terms, not using medical jargon, and speaking to them at the right level, like the average person reads at an 8th grade reading level or below. And when you have an article that's reading to you at a 13th grade level, you're not going to retain that knowledge. And I advise people to create really user-friendly websites. I advise them on their operations as well. How are they recruiting caregivers? I do a lot of those types of campaigns. I also work with healthcare SaaS companies that create software and programs that are helpful in that sense. So my clients have quite a range in terms of what they offer, but the common theme is to want to improve the status of care at home. And that's my aim.
And I know you're going to do very well with your career. That's for sure. Jenn, how can people get in touch with you if they wanted to talk to you?
My website, yeah, you got it. My website is www.nextgen, with 2 N's, copy.com, COPY, or you can text me or call me at 978-875-1724.
And you were also on LinkedIn, and I'll tell you, folks, Jenn has some great articles on LinkedIn, very thought-provoking and just really very informative. I love reading your articles. I don't always comment, but I love reading love reading your articles. You had one just happens to stick out. It was about urinary infections.
Yeah, urinary tract infections.
Yes. You know, they could happen at any age, not just a older person's problem, but it can happen with young people as well. And I just really admire you, Jenn, for what you're doing for someone. You know, I know it's hard being a caregiver when you're young, and I know it affects you. But I believe that because you were a caregiver when you were young, that you have compassion and you are passionate about what you're doing. And I just want to tell the audience out there, you know, when you are caregiving for someone and you have children, it's hard on the children and it affects them. I wish somebody would do a research on that. But you can teach your children life's valuable lessons, to be compassionate, to have a passion, and in helping others. And, you know, we as the adults set the example. And I just think that that's what happened with you, Jenn. You became a very compassionate person and passionate about taking care of elderly people, of aging, caregivers. You know what it's like. And I just think that's what I think. Very proud of you.
Thank you. It's been a really great experience, and I will say, you know, I did have resentment. I did have a lot of guilt. There were times where I felt bad. There were times where I, you know, regretted it. There were times when I wanted to stop. That, you know, caregiving isn't 100%, you know, roses and daisies. It's not a perfect experience, but it is one that I would never take back for anything, despite the difficult times that it did bring. It definitely helped to inform and shape the character that I developed and the person I became. So it was definitely a formative experience, but it isn't for the faint of heart. Definitely ask yourself if you want to be a caregiver before signing up and doing it, because it is it's a commitment.
Yes. Guilt is universal with caregivers. I know I experienced guilt. I felt guilty about a lot of things. I just had to let it go. I've talked about unjustifiable guilt, where it's not your fault. One thing I had to tell people, when you are a caregiver and your children are involved, whether they're very young or teenagers, I just want to give the advice: let your children vent to you, and don't shut the door in communication. Don't judge your children. If they come to you and say caregiving stinks, don't judge them for that. My son came to me and he said, I don't like changing Daddy's diaper. I don't like caregiving. And I said, you know what, Josh? I agree with you. I don't like it either. And I don't like changing Daddy's diaper either. But we do it because we love him and, we take care of him. But I made sure that Josh went out. And I think that we need to let our children go out and have a good time and not let them feel guilty that they went out. This is very important, folks. And children need counseling sometimes. We need counseling. And I highly recommend counseling for caregivers, for teenagers, children, even family counseling, if there's someone in the family who you're taking care of and you see children having distress and anxiety. Please get your child help. It's no shame. We need to stop the stigma also of getting help, mental health issues. The stigma must stop. We must raise our children that it is okay to feel however you feel and that there is help available. And we need to get them help. And that's my rant. Did you ever go for counseling, Jenn?
So important. I did never go for counseling. I didn't really see anybody or talk to anybody until the day after my grandmother died. I had a test in biology, and I ran upstairs to go to the counselor, talked to her really quickly, took my test, came back, and that was the only time I've ever seen a counselor for this reason. It was very helpful, but it was very brief. It was only offered through my college, so if I wasn't in school at the time, I wouldn't have had access to counseling. We didn't have any bereavement support through our hospice, so we were really left to fend for ourselves in that sense. I was so fortunate to have met my husband shortly before my grandmother passed away and to have been engaged at that time. He was so supportive. He never retreated or tried to run away or hang out with me less. He hung out with me more, in fact. We saw a movie the next day after my test. It was Bad Moms Christmas or something like that. I remember going to the theater and laughing, and I was like, I can still laugh, even though my grandmother's dead. You know, it was something I felt like I couldn't feel. Like, why am I allowed to be happy despite everything that happened? Like, I feel like I was really fighting with my emotions and really didn't know how to feel. You know, I was just like, how can I have fun or move on with my life knowing that this happened? And it took a really long time for me to get to this point where I feel comfortable. It's been like 5 years since my grandmother passed, and I'm in a good place. My mental health is good. Well, it's decent. Yeah, things are just really good now, but I definitely couldn't have done it without the support of my husband. You know, he really gives me the time. He is patient with me. He's so understanding, and he was raised by his great-grandparents, so he was very right there in terms of understanding how I was going through things, and he was there at my house when we were taking care of my grandmother, so he was kind of privy to how things were, and he was so supportive, and I couldn't thank him enough.
Oh, that is so sweet. I'm glad you have a good husband, a supportive one. That's very, very important. And, you know, the feelings, I'm now 2 years after, a little over 2 years that Matt's died, and I'm come to terms with, yes, I can be happy, and I can have my moments of sadness, and sometimes they're mixed in together. And it's okay. And I told Josh right from the get-go, you know, Daddy would want you to enjoy life. And Matt died January 1st. I think a couple of weeks later, Josh said, can I go to a hockey game? I said, of course. Your father loved hockey. He would love for you to go to a hockey game and enjoy yourself.
And he'll probably be right there with him.
Yes. Yes, I said, your father be smiling. I think that, you know, we really need to understand that teenagers, younger people do grieve, and it's a whole nother show, but we need to be allowed to grieve, and that's society really needs to change about that. I'm doing my best and doing shows about grieving, being open about my own grieving, and, you know, we need to accept that, yeah, we're sad because our loved ones aren't here. We really miss them. We miss their physical presence. But life does go on. It may not be the same, but it's different. But it goes on. And I'm in a much better place too, Jen, than I was 2 years ago, even last year. That's for sure. And just want to encourage caregivers. Jen said earlier, it's not always going to a spa. I couldn't go to a spa. I couldn't go on a week vacation. I did get counseling at that time with my husband's insurance. I went to a counselor. But also I'm learning really this year, take care of your soul and work on your inner self. Because when you change your inner self, you're going to change and feel better about yourself, because you can't change anyone else. You can't change the situation. If someone died, you can't change that. But you can change how you think, your thought process. And I've done a lot of shows on that lately. So I just want to encourage people to listen to those shows because they're very helpful. But I want to thank you, Jennifer, for coming on today. You are such a sweetheart. I see a really bright future ahead for you. I just feel that. And I'm so glad that we met and that you came on chatting with Betsy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and I had a really great time. It was so great to catch up.
Oh, thank you, and I'm so glad that you came on. I'd love to have you on again because you are just really a wealth of information, and just to talk about your experience as a young adult, preteen even, being a caregiver. Oh, I should do a show with you about that sometime. Children.
Yeah, one about younger caregiving. Yeah.
Yes. Children caregiving. Very important for people to get point of view from a really young person. I mean, you were 12, and that's young. I've interviewed people who are, older in their 20s. I interviewed Josh and someone else who were in their 20s and older, but a young person of 12 years old, Jen, you got to come on again. Thank you.
You got it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Folks, if you missed any of this podcast, you can hear it all again wherever you hear your favorite podcast. It is free to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, and I highly recommend that you do subscribe because I have phenomenal guests, phenomenal resources to help you, the audience, because that's what my show is about, is helping people. It's my way of paying it forward. And I want to thank Jeannie White, who's station manager, Passionate World Talk Radio, who writes the blog. Please read the blog. So have information that you will need to get in touch with Jennifer. And I want to thank Lauren Caldwell, who's CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. It gives people a chance, an opportunity to be heard. And I just have to say, I am grateful and blessed to be a host on Passionate World Talk Radio. I really am very thankful. Thank you for listening, everyone. And as I always say, in a world where you could be kind, or a world where you could be anything, please be kind. Please be kind to yourself and to each other. Sometimes we're not kind to ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. Bye-bye now.
Are you looking for an internet talk radio station for your podcast? Look no further. At the helm of Passionate World Talk Radio are two women that want to provide a spot for you and your podcast to be heard. There are many other places for your podcast, but PWTR has the audience. You will not be disappointed. Our station has been on the internet for the past 16 years. Call us for more information. 484-364-1032 or text Jeannie White, station manager at PHECONNECTSHOW@gmail.com for podcast show details. Thank you for listening to Passionate World Talk Radio. You can listen to this program all over again by going over to https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. You can also hear it on Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Alexa, AMFM247.com every Tuesday evening between 8 and 9 p.m. YouTube, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, and all the other podcast directories one can find on the internet.